The general was dead. Not dying, dead. No pulse, no breath. Blood pooling under the surgical table. The chief surgeon had called it 3 minutes ago, and now the room sat in that hollow, ringing silence that comes after a battle no one wins. Four-star General Marcus Hale, decorated hero of 3 wars, lay covered in sterile sheets while the best trauma surgeons in the country stood around him like mourners at a funeral they'd just lost. Then a voice, small, steady, almost too quiet to catch, cut through the stillness. Wait. Everyone turned. It came from the corner. From her. The trainee nurse, the one they'd been shoving aside all night, the one they'd told to shut up, step back, stay out of the way. Nora Hayes stood there, hands still trembling, eyes locked on the body. I think we can still bring him back. The room didn't just go quiet, it went cold. If you want to see how a nobody became the only one who could save a legend, stick with me until the end. Like this video, drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. And let's find out what happens when the least qualified person in the room refuses to stay silent. Nora had been invisible for 6 months. Not literally, of course. She clocked in every shift at Hartford General Hospital, scrubbed in when told, handed over instruments, restocked supplies, smiled politely when spoken to. But invisible in the way that mattered. No one looked at her twice. No one asked her opinion. No one remembered her name unless they needed something carried or cleaned. She was 24, fresh out of nursing school, still fumbling with IV placements and second-guessing herself on medication charts. The other nurses treated her like a well-meaning puppy. The doctors treated her like furniture. And she'd learned, very quickly, not to speak unless spoken to. Tonight was no different. At least, it wasn't supposed to be. The emergency call came in at 11:47 p.m. Trauma alert, military convoy, high-priority patient inbound. The words crackled over the hospital intercom, sharp and clipped. And within seconds, the ER exploded into motion. Residents sprinted down hallways. Attending physicians barked orders. Nurses prepped trauma bays with the kind of speed that came from too much practice. Nora had been restocking gauze in Bay 4 when the alert hit. She froze, rolls of bandages still clutched in her hands, watching the controlled chaos unfold around her. Someone shoved past her without a glance. Someone else yelled for O-negative blood. The double doors at the ambulance entrance swung open, and a flood of people in military uniforms poured in alongside the gurney. She saw the patient for only a second before the crowd swallowed him. A man, older, gray-haired, unconscious, covered in blood. His uniform was shredded. His chest wasn't moving right. "Clear the bay," a voice shouted. "VIP trauma. All hands." Nora stepped back instinctively, pressing herself against the wall as the gurney rolled past. She caught a glimpse of the man's face, pale, slack, eyes half open but unseeing. Then he was gone, swept into Trauma 1, and the doors slammed shut behind him. For a moment, she just stood there, heart pounding, useless. Then Dr. Eric Callahan walked past her, and she knew this was bigger than she'd thought. Callahan was the chief of trauma surgery at Hartford General, a man whose reputation preceded him like a thunderclap. He didn't do routine cases. He didn't show up for minor emergencies. If Callahan was here, it meant someone important was dying. Nora hesitated, then followed at a distance. She shouldn't have. She wasn't assigned to this case. She wasn't even supposed to be in this wing. But something pulled her forward anyway. Curiosity, maybe? Or the stupid, stubborn part of her that hadn't been crushed yet. She slipped into the observation gallery above Trauma 1, a narrow, glass-walled room used by med students and nurses to watch surgeries without getting in the way. It was empty. She sat down in the back row, barely breathing, and looked down at the scene below. The trauma bay was a storm of controlled violence. Nurses cut away the patient's uniform. Blood-soaked fabric hit the floor in wet heaps. Someone yelled for suction. Someone else called out vital signs in a flat, rapid monotone. BP dropping, 60/40. Pulse thready, 120. Multiple GSWs to the chest and abdomen, significant blood loss. Callahan stood at the head of the table, gloved hands already working, his voice cutting through the noise like a scalpel. "Get me 2 units of O-neg, now. Prep for an emergency thoracotomy. And someone get those goddamn soldiers out of my OR." Nora's eyes flicked to the group of uniformed men standing just outside the bay, faces hard, arms crossed. They didn't move. One of them, a tall man with silver bars on his collar, stepped forward. "Doctor, that's General Marcus Hale. I don't care if he's the president," Callahan snapped. "You're in my way. Out." The officer's jaw tightened, but he stepped back. The soldiers stayed, though, clustered just beyond the glass, watching with the kind of intensity that made Nora's skin prickle. She leaned forward, eyes locked on the general's face. He looked wrong. Not just injured, something deeper. His skin had a grayish tint, and his breathing, what little there was, came in shallow, rasping gasps that didn't match the rhythm of the ventilator. Callahan worked fast. He made the first incision, cracked the chest, exposed the heart. Blood welled up, dark and thick, and the suction hissed as it pulled it away. "Pericardial tamponade," Callahan said. "Drain it." One of the residents moved in with a needle, piercing the sac around the heart. Blood drained out in a slow, ugly stream. "BP stabilizing," a nurse called. "Good. Now let's find the bleeder." Nora watched, barely blinking. She'd seen surgeries before, plenty of them, but this was different. This was speed and precision and desperation all tangled together, and even from up here she could feel the tension radiating off Callahan like heat. Minutes passed. 10. 20. The team worked in near silence, hands moving in practiced synchrony. Callahan sutured a torn vessel. Another surgeon clamped off a bleeder in the abdomen. The general's vitals climbed, just slightly. BP 70/50. Pulse 100. "He's holding." Callahan exhaled, barely. "All right, let's close him up and get him to—" The monitor screamed. Every head snapped up. The flatline tone cut through the room like a siren, high and shrill and unforgiving. "V-fib," someone yelled. "Charge the paddles." "Charging. 200. Clear." The general's body jerked. The line didn't change. "Again. 300. Clear." Another jolt, another flatline. Nora's hands gripped the edge of the railing. Her pulse hammered in her ears, louder than the monitor. Callahan's face was stone. "Epi, 1 milligram. Push it now." A nurse jabbed the syringe into the IV line. 30 seconds. Nothing. Again. Another dose. Another 30 seconds. Still nothing. Callahan started compressions himself. Hands locked, shoulders driving down hard and fast. Sweat beaded on his forehead. His jaw was tight. "Come on," he muttered. "Come on." 1 minute, 2. The line stayed flat. Nora's stomach twisted. She'd seen this before. She knew what came next. Callahan stopped. He straightened slowly, pulling off his gloves. His voice was flat. "Time of death? 12:19 a.m. The room went silent. One of the nurses covered the general's face with a sheet. Another turned off the monitor. The soldiers outside the glass didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there like statues carved from grief and rage. Nora sat frozen in the gallery, staring down at the body. And that's when she saw it. Something small, something wrong. The way the general's chest sat, the angle of his neck, the faint, almost invisible discoloration along his trachea. Her breath caught. No, they'd missed something. She stood up, legs shaking, heart slamming against her ribs. She didn't think, didn't plan. She just moved. She was out of the gallery and down the stairs before she could stop herself, pushing through the doors into Trauma 1. Every face turned toward her. Callahan looked up, eyes narrowed. "Who the hell are you?" I'm Nora Hayes. I'm a trainee nurse. Then get out. This isn't your case." "Wait." Her voice cracked, but she forced it steady. "Wait, please. I think you missed something." The silence that followed was suffocating. Callahan stared at her like she'd just spoken in tongues. One of the residents laughed, a short, ugly sound. "Excuse me?" Callahan's voice was ice. Nora's hands were shaking. She clenched them into fists. "His airway. I think there's something blocking his airway." Another resident scoffed. "We intubated him. He's been on a vent the whole time." "I know, but—" She stepped closer, pointing at the general's neck. "Look at the discoloration and the angle. His trachea's compressed. The tube might be in, but it's not getting air through." Callahan's expression didn't change. "We checked the airway. Multiple times." "But did you check for a crush injury?" Nora's voice was rising now. desperation bleeding through. If his trachea collapsed during the trauma, the tube could be sitting in dead space. He's not getting oxygen. That's why his heart stopped. For 3 long seconds, no one moved. Then Callahan's jaw tightened. "You have 30 seconds to prove that, or you're out of this hospital." Nora's heart nearly stopped, but she nodded. She moved to the table, hands trembling so badly she almost couldn't hold the laryngoscope. She tilted the general's head back, opened his mouth, and looked. There. The tube was in. But just beyond it, the trachea was collapsed, partially crushed, the tissue swollen and dark. "Oh my God," she whispered. She didn't wait for permission. She grabbed a scalpel, made a vertical incision just below the cricoid cartilage, and slid in a smaller emergency airway tube, bypassing the damage entirely. Then she squeezed the ambu bag. Once, twice. The room held its breath. And then, beep, beep, beep. The monitor flared to life. The general's chest rose. His heart kicked back into rhythm, weak but steady. Someone gasped. Callahan stepped forward, eyes wide, staring at the monitor like it had just performed a magic trick. "Jesus Christ," he breathed. Nora stepped back, legs nearly giving out. Her hands were covered in blood. Her vision was blurring, but the general was breathing. One of the soldiers outside let out a choked sound, half laugh, half sob. Callahan turned to Nora, and for the first time all night, he really looked at her. "What's your name again?" "Nora," she whispered. "Nora Hayes." He nodded slowly, then he turned to the team. "Get him stable. ICU now. And someone," he glanced back at Nora, "someone get her a chair before she faints." Nora didn't faint, but she did sit down, hard, on the floor, her back against the wall, staring at nothing. Around her, the room erupted back into motion. Orders shouted, equipment moved, the general prepped for transport. But all Nora could hear was the steady, rhythmic beep of the monitor. Alive. She'd brought him back. The next hour passed in a blur. Nora sat in the hallway outside Trauma 1, back pressed against the cool tile wall, knees pulled up to her chest. Her scrubs were stained dark with blood. Her hands still shook. Every few minutes, someone walked past. Nurses, orderlies, residents. And they'd glance at her, then look away quickly, like she was something fragile they didn't want to touch. No one spoke to her. Inside the trauma bay, she could hear muffled voices, the beep of monitors, the hiss of ventilators. They were stabilizing the general, prepping him for transfer to the ICU. She'd done her part. Now she was just waiting. For what? She wasn't sure. At 1:15 a.m., the door opened and Callahan stepped out. He'd taken off his surgical gown, but his scrubs were still speckled with blood. He looked tired, the kind of tired that went bone deep. He saw her sitting there and stopped. For a moment, he just stared at her. Then he walked over and crouched down so they were at eye level. "You still here?" Nora nodded. Her throat felt too tight to speak. Callahan exhaled slowly. "He's stable. We're moving him to ICU in 10 minutes. If he makes it through the night," he paused, "he'll make it because of you." She didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. Callahan studied her for a long moment. "How long have you been a nurse?" 6 months, she said quietly. "Trainee. I'm still learning." He made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You just performed an emergency cricothyrotomy on a flatline patient in front of a room full of surgeons. That's not still learning. That's..." He shook his head. "I don't know what that is." Nora looked down at her hands. "I just saw something, that's all." "Yeah, something the rest of us missed." His voice was flat, but there was an edge to it, something sharp and uncomfortable. "You made us look like idiots." She flinched. "I didn't mean..." "I'm not blaming you." Callahan stood up, rubbing the back of his neck. "I'm stating a fact. We missed it. You didn't. And now I have to figure out how the hell that happened." He turned to go, then stopped. "Get some rest. You're going to need it." "Why?" "Because tomorrow, everyone's going to want to know who you are." He walked away before she could respond. Nora sat there for another 20 minutes, until her legs stopped shaking enough to stand. Then she got up, walked to the locker room, and sat down on the bench in front of her locker. Her phone buzzed. A text from her roommate, Jess. "You coming home tonight?" Nora stared at the message for a long time. Then she typed back, Yeah, soon. She didn't move. Scott. By morning, the hospital was buzzing. Nora heard it the moment she walked through the main entrance at 6:45 a.m. Voices in clusters, phones out, people whispering as she passed. She kept her head down, clutching her coffee like a lifeline, and headed straight for the nurses' station on the fourth floor. Lila Martinez, one of the senior nurses, was already there, flipping through charts. She looked up when Nora approached, and her eyes went wide. Holy shit! It's you! Nora stopped. What? You're the one who saved General Hale. How do you... Everyone knows. Lila leaned in, voice dropping. The residents are talking about it. The attending physicians are talking about it. There's a video. Nora's stomach dropped. A video? Someone in the gallery recorded it on their phone. It's all over the hospital intranet. Lila pulled out her phone, tapped a few times, then turned the screen toward Nora. There it was. Grainy, shaky footage of the trauma bay, the monitor flatlining, Callahan calling the time of death. And then Nora, stepping forward, small and trembling, saying something the audio didn't quite catch. Then the scalpel, the incision, the ambu bag, and the monitor coming back to life. The video ended. Nora felt sick. This is... She couldn't finish the sentence. Insane? Lila offered. Yeah, people are freaking out. Half the staff thinks you're a genius. The other half thinks you got lucky. She paused. What do you think? Nora didn't answer. She just walked away, past the nurses' station, past the break room, into the supply closet at the end of the hall. She shut the door behind her, leaned against it, and closed her eyes. Her phone buzzed. Another text. This time from a number she didn't recognize. This is Dr. Callahan. Report to my office at 9 a.m. Don't be late. She stared at the message until her vision blurred. Callahan's office was on the 7th floor, tucked away in a corner of the administrative wing. Nora had never been up here before. The hallway was quiet, carpeted, lined with framed photographs of hospital benefactors and former chiefs of staff. She knocked on the door at exactly 9 a.m. Come in. She opened the door. Callahan was sitting behind his desk, reading something on his computer. He didn't look up. Close the door. She did. Sit. She sat. For a full 30 seconds, he didn't say anything, just kept reading, eyes flicking across the screen. Then he closed the laptop and looked at her. Do you know why you're here? No, sir. Because I need to understand what happened last night. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. You're a trainee nurse, 6 months out of school, no trauma experience, no surgical training, and yet you identified a collapsed trachea that 4 experienced surgeons missed, and you performed a procedure most nurses wouldn't even attempt. He paused. So I'm going to ask you a very simple question, and I want a very simple answer. How? Nora swallowed. I saw it. You saw it. Yes. How? I don't know. She stopped, trying to find the words. I was watching from the gallery, and when you called it, I kept looking at him, and something didn't feel right. His chest wasn't sitting the way it should, and his neck. There was this faint bruising right here. She touched her own throat. It looked like blunt force trauma. So I thought, maybe the airway was compromised. Callahan's expression didn't change. And you decided to act on that. Yes. Without asking permission. There wasn't time. There's always time to ask. Nora's jaw tightened. He was dead. If I'd asked, he'd still be dead. Silence. Then Callahan smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. You're right, he said. And that's the problem. He stood up, walked over to the window, and looked out at the parking lot below. Do you know what the mortality rate is for cricothyrotomies performed in the field? No. 30%. And that's when they're done by trained paramedics with proper equipment. He turned back to her. You did it with a scalpel and a tube in under 2 minutes on a patient who'd been declared dead. The odds of that working were almost 0. But it did work. This time. His voice was hard now. What if it hadn't? What if you'd severed an artery? What if the tube had gone into the esophagus instead of the trachea? What if you'd caused an infection or a bleed, or any one of a dozen other complications. Nora didn't answer. You'd be facing a malpractice suit. You'd lose your license. You'd never work in a hospital again. He walked back to his desk, hands braced on the edge. And I'd be the one explaining to the general's family why I let an unqualified trainee cut into his throat. She felt her face go hot. I wasn't trying to. I know what you were trying to do. His voice softened, just slightly. You were trying to save a life, and you did. But that doesn't change the fact that you took a massive risk, not just with his life, but with your career. He sat down again, rubbing his temples. Here's the situation. The hospital administration wants to meet with you. So does the general's command. There's going to be an inquiry, not a disciplinary one, just procedural. They need to document what happened. Nora's stomach twisted. Am I in trouble? No. He looked at her. But you're not safe either. What does that mean? It means people are watching you now. Some of them think you're a hero. Some of them think you're a liability. And some of them, he paused. Some of them are going to want to tear you down just to prove they were right to ignore you in the first place. She felt cold. Callahan leaned forward. So, here's my advice. Keep your head down. Do your job. Don't talk to the press. Don't talk to anyone unless you have to. And for God's sake, don't let this go to your head. Nora nodded slowly. Okay. Good. He picked up a pen, started writing something on a notepad. You're dismissed. She stood up, started toward the door. Hayes. She stopped, turned back. Callahan didn't look up. For what it's worth, you did good work last night. It was the closest thing to praise she'd ever heard from him. She left the office and walked back down the hall, hands shoved in her pockets, heart still racing. People were watching her now. She wasn't sure if that was a good thing. The inquiry happened 3 days later, in a conference room on the hospital's executive floor. Nora sat at one end of a long table, facing a panel of 5 people. 2 hospital administrators, a military liaison officer, a representative from the state medical board, and Dr. Callahan. They asked her the same questions over and over. What did you see? When did you see it? Why did you act? Did anyone tell you to act? Did you have authorization? She answered each one as clearly as she could, trying not to let her voice shake. The military liaison, a stone-faced colonel named Reeves, seemed particularly interested in the timeline. You're saying you identified the airway obstruction within seconds of the time of death being called? Yes, sir. And you immediately decided to intervene? Yes. Without consulting the attending physician? There wasn't time to consult. Reeves leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. Miss Hayes, do you understand the chain of command in a medical setting? I'm a nurse, not a soldier. That's not an answer. Nora met his eyes. Yes, I understand it. Then you understand that what you did was a direct violation of protocol. One of the administrators, a thin woman named Dr. Patricia Voss, cut in. Colonel, I don't think we're here to reprimand Miss Hayes. The general is alive because of her actions. The general is alive despite a massive breach of procedure, Reeves said flatly. If this sets a precedent where junior staff feel empowered to override senior physicians, then maybe senior physicians should do their jobs better, Nora said. The room went silent. Reeves stared at her. Excuse me? She knew she should stop, knew she should apologize, backtrack, play it safe. But she was tired of being talked over, tired of being dismissed. You want to talk about protocol? She said. Fine. The protocol says you check the airway. They checked it. The protocol says you run a full trauma workup. They did. But protocol doesn't account for the fact that sometimes the obvious answer is wrong. And when that happens, you need someone willing to look closer. She paused. I looked closer. That's all I did. Reeves's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. Doctor. Voss glanced at Callahan. Dr. Callahan, do you have anything to add? Callahan looked at Nora for a long moment. Then he spoke. Miss Hayes acted outside the normal scope of her role, that's a fact. But she also identified a critical issue that the surgical team missed, also a fact. He paused. If we're being honest, this incident exposes a flaw in our system. We rely so heavily on hierarchy and specialization that we sometimes ignore input from people lower on the ladder, even when that input is correct. Dr. Voss nodded slowly. So what are you recommending? I'm recommending we don't punish her for being right. Callahan's voice was firm. And I'm recommending we take a hard look at how we train our teams to communicate during high-pressure situations. The medical board representative, a quiet man who hadn't spoken yet, cleared his throat. For the record, I agree. This isn't a disciplinary matter. It's a learning opportunity. Reeves didn't look convinced, but he didn't argue. Dr. Voss closed her folder. All right. Miss Hayes, thank you for your time. We'll be in touch if we need any further information. Nora stood up, legs unsteady, and walked out of the room. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall and exhaled slowly. She'd survived. Barely. That night, Nora sat in her apartment staring at her phone. The hospital had released a statement earlier that day. Brief, professional, deliberately vague. It acknowledged that General Marcus Hale had undergone emergency surgery at Hartford General and was in stable condition. It did not mention Nora by name. But the video was still circulating, and now people were talking. Her phone had been buzzing non-stop. Texts from old classmates, messages from people she barely knew, even a few emails from reporters asking for interviews. She ignored all of them. Jess, her roommate, poked her head into the living room. You okay? Yeah. You sure? Because you've been sitting there for like an hour. Nora set her phone down. I'm fine. Jess sat down on the couch next to her. You know you're, like, famous now, right? I'm not famous. You saved a 4-star general. That's pretty famous. Nora didn't respond. Jess nudged her. Come on, this is a good thing. You did something amazing. I did my job. Yeah, but most people don't do their job like that. Jess grinned. You're a badass. Nora almost smiled. Almost. Her phone buzzed again, another text. This one was from a number she didn't recognize. Miss Hayes, this is Colonel Reeves. I'd like to speak with you privately. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., Hartford General Main Lobby. It's important. She stared at the message. Jess leaned over. Who's that? Military guy from the inquiry. What does he want? I don't know. But she had a feeling it wasn't good. The next morning, Nora walked into the hospital lobby at 9:55 a.m. Colonel Reeves was already there, standing near the coffee shop, arms crossed, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. He saw her and nodded. Miss Hayes. Colonel? Walk with me. They walked outside into the small courtyard behind the hospital. It was quiet, just a few benches, some trees, a fountain that hadn't worked in years. Reeves stopped near one of the benches but didn't sit. He turned to face her. I'm going to be blunt, he said. You embarrassed a lot of people. Nora crossed her arms. That wasn't my intention. Doesn't matter. Intentions don't change outcomes. He paused. The surgical team that worked on General Hale, they're some of the best trauma surgeons in the country. And now, every time someone mentions that case, they're going to be known as the team that missed the airway. They did miss it. I know. His voice was hard. But you need to understand something. In the military, reputation matters. Trust matters. If soldiers start questioning whether their doctors know what they're doing, people die. Nora's jaw tightened. So what are you saying? I should have let him die to protect their reputation? I'm saying you should have followed the chain of command. He'd be dead if I had. Reeves stared at her for a long moment. Then he sighed. You're not wrong, he said quietly. And that's the problem. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He handed it to her. What is this? A letter. From General Hale. Nora unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was shaky, but legible. Miss Hayes, I'm told I owe you my life. I don't remember much from that night, but I've been briefed on what happened. You saw something no one else did. You acted when no one else would. And because of that, I'm still here. I don't know if you'll ever read this. But if you do, I want you to know what you did took more than skill. It took courage. The kind of courage most people spend their whole lives searching for. Thank you, General Marcus Hale. Nora's hands were shaking. She looked up at Reeves. Why are you showing me this? Because you need to understand what's at stake. Reeves's voice was steady. The general is alive. That's good. But now people are asking questions. Why did the surgical team miss it? Why did a trainee nurse have to step in? What else are we missing? He paused. Those are dangerous questions. Nora folded the letter carefully. So what do you want from me? I want you to stay quiet. Reeves met her eyes. No interviews, no statements, no grandstanding. Let this blow over. And if I don't? His expression hardened. Then you become the face of a scandal, and trust me, you don't want that. Nora tucked the letter into her pocket. Is that a threat? It's advice. Reeves turned to go, then stopped. One more thing. The general wants to meet you once he's recovered. Why? Because he's a man who pays his debts. Reeves walked away, leaving her standing alone in the courtyard. Nora stood there for a long time, staring at nothing. Then she pulled out the letter and read it again. Courage. She wasn't sure if that's what it was, but whatever it was, it had just made her life a lot more complicated. She wasn't sure if that's what it was, but whatever it was, it had just made her life a lot more complicated. The hospital felt different after that. Smaller, somehow. Like the walls had moved in overnight and everyone was watching her through gaps in the plaster. Nora kept her head down, worked her shifts, spoke only when necessary. But it didn't matter. The stairs followed her everywhere, down hallways into break rooms, across the cafeteria. Some looked at her with curiosity, others with something colder. 3 days after her conversation with Reeves, she was restocking supplies in the ER when Dr. Monica Strand walked past. Strand was one of the senior residents, sharp-featured and sharper-tongued, the kind of person who could slice you open with a comment and make it look like a compliment. She stopped in front of Nora's cart. So you're the miracle worker. Nora didn't look up. Just doing my job. Right, your job. Strand picked up a roll of gauze, examined it like it was evidence. You know, I've been working here for 4 years. I've seen a lot of cases, a lot of saves, but I've never seen someone with 6 months of experience perform a crick on a dead patient and have it work. Nora kept stacking supplies. I got lucky. Did you? Strand set the gauze down. Or did you know something the rest of us didn't? Now Nora looked up. What's that supposed to mean? Strand shrugged. Nothing. Just curious how a trainee nurse manages to outthink an entire trauma team. She smiled. Thin, tight. Makes you wonder what else you're capable of. She walked away before Nora could respond. Nora stood there, hands clenched around a box of syringes, pulse hammering in her ears. That night, she went home and found Jess sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open, scrolling through something. She looked up when Nora walked in. You need to see this. See what? Jess turned the laptop around. It was an article. Not from a major news outlet, just a local blog, the kind that survived on speculation and half-checked facts. The headline read, Who is Nora Hayes, the trainee nurse who saved a general and embarrassed an entire hospital? Nora's stomach dropped. She sat down slowly, eyes scanning the text. It was worse than she'd thought. The article didn't just recount what happened in the trauma bay. It dug into her background, her nursing school records, her previous jobs, even her hometown. It quoted unnamed sources who claimed she'd been problematic during training, overconfident, unwilling to follow orders. It painted her as either a reckless maverick or a dangerous liability, depending on which paragraph you read. Jesus, Nora whispered. Jess closed the laptop. It's bullshit. You know that, right? Doesn't matter if it's bullshit. People will believe it. Not everyone. Enough. Nora rubbed her face. Who even writes this stuff? Someone with an axe to grind. Jess leaned back. Or someone who got paid to grind it. Nora looked at her. You think someone's behind this? I think people don't like being shown up, especially people with big egos and small talent. Nora didn't respond, but the thought stuck. The next morning, she got called into the nursing director's office. Helen Carmichael was a hard woman, all business, no warmth. She'd been running the nursing staff at Hartford General for over a decade, and she had the kind of reputation that made even senior nurses nervous. Nora knocked on the door at 8 a.m. sharp. Come in. She stepped inside. Carmichael was sitting behind her desk, hands folded, expression unreadable. Sit. Nora sat. Carmichael didn't waste time. I'm sure you've seen the article. Yes. And? And it's mostly lies. Mostly. Carmichael's eyes were flat. Which parts are true? Nora hesitated. I did perform the cricothyrotomy, and I didn't ask permission first. Why not? Because the patient was dead. According to Dr. Callahan, yes. According to you, no. Carmichael leaned forward. Do you understand the position that puts me in? I'm not sure what you mean. I mean that I have a trainee nurse who decided she knew better than a trauma surgeon with 20 years of experience. And now, because of that decision, there are questions being asked about oversight, about training, about whether this hospital is properly managing its staff. Nora's jaw tightened. I saved his life. You got lucky. Carmichael's voice was ice. And luck isn't a strategy. So what are you saying? Carmichael sat back. I'm saying you need to be very careful. People are watching you now, and not all of them are rooting for you. Nora stood up. Is that it? No. Carmichael opened a drawer, pulled out a folder, and slid it across the desk. You're being reassigned. Nora stared at the folder. Reassigned where? Night shift. General med-surg floor. Effective immediately. Why? Because the ER is high profile right now, and I can't afford any more incidents. Nora felt something cold settle in her chest. You're benching me. I'm protecting you. Carmichael's tone didn't soften. And I'm protecting this hospital. Take the reassignment, keep your head down, and in a few months, this will all blow over. And if I don't? Carmichael's expression didn't change. Then I'll have to consider whether you're a good fit for this institution. The words hung in the air like a blade. Nora picked up the folder. Understood. She walked out without another word. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, from anger. They were punishing her, not officially, not in any way that would show up on a record, but they were punishing her all the same, for being right. She went to her locker, grabbed her things, and left the hospital. She didn't go home. She just walked, block after block, hands shoved in her pockets, mind racing. By the time she stopped, she was standing outside a coffee shop 3 miles from the hospital. She went inside, ordered something she didn't want, and sat down in the back corner. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Meet me, 7 p.m., Riverside Park, North Entrance. Come alone. M.H. Nora stared at the message. M.H. Marcus Hale. The general wanted to meet. She should have ignored it, should have deleted the message and gone home. But she didn't. At 6:55 p.m., she was standing at the north entrance of Riverside Park, watching the sun sink below the skyline. The park was quiet. Just a few joggers, a couple walking a dog, a man on a bench reading a newspaper. Then she saw him. General Marcus Hale was walking toward her, flanked by 2 soldiers in plain clothes. He looked different than he had on the operating table. Older, thinner, but very much alive. His steps were slow but steady. When he reached her, he stopped and studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled. Miss Hayes. General? He gestured to a bench nearby. Walk with me? They walked in silence for a minute, the soldiers following at a distance. Finally, Hale spoke. I wanted to thank you in person. Nora didn't know what to say to that. You already sent a letter. Letters are easy. This is harder. He glanced at her. You saved my life. I don't take that lightly. Don't say you were just doing your job. His voice was firm but not unkind. You did more than that. You did what no one else was willing to do. They reached another bench and sat down. Hale leaned back, wincing slightly. Still sore? Nora asked. Broken ribs? They'll heal. He looked at her. I've been briefed on what happened after. The article, the reassignment, the pushback. Nora stiffened. How do you know about that? I make it my business to know. He paused. You're being punished for saving me. That doesn't sit well. It's fine. I can handle it. Can you? His eyes were sharp. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like they're trying to bury you. Nora didn't respond. Hale leaned forward. I've seen this before. Someone does the right thing, makes the people in charge look bad, and suddenly they're the problem. It's not about what you did. It's about what you exposed. Which is what? Failure. He said it simply. The surgical team failed. The system failed. And instead of admitting that, they're blaming you for pointing it out. Nora looked down at her hands. So what am I supposed to do? Fight back. She looked up. How? By not letting them silence you. Hale's voice was steel. You have something most people don't. Proof that you were right. Use it. I don't want to be some kind of symbol. Too late. You already are. He stood up slowly. The question is whether you're going to let other people define what that symbol means, or if you're going to define it yourself. He started walking back toward his security detail, then stopped and turned. One more thing. If you ever need help, real help, you call me. He pulled out a card, handed it to her. That's my direct line, not my staff. Me. Nora took the card. Why are you doing this? Because I owe you. He met her eyes. And because I've spent 30 years in the military watching good people get crushed by bad systems, I'm tired of it. He walked away, and Nora sat alone on the bench, staring at the card in her hand. The next week was a special kind of hell. Night shift on the med-surg floor was exactly as miserable as she'd expected. 12-hour shifts, understaffed, overworked, dealing with patients who ranged from stable to circling the drain. The nurses she worked with were polite but distant. No one mentioned the general. No one mentioned the article. It was like she'd been erased, but the whispers hadn't stopped. If anything, they'd gotten worse. She heard them in the break room, in the hallways, in the elevator. People who didn't know she was listening. I heard she faked the whole thing. No way. I heard she had inside information. Someone told her what to look for. She's sleeping with one of the surgeons. That's how she got away with it. Nora kept her head down and said nothing, but every word was a needle under her skin. On the 8th night of her reassignment, she was checking vitals on a post-op patient when her phone buzzed. Another unknown number. She ignored it. It buzzed again, then again. Finally, she stepped into the hallway and checked the message. You need to see this, now. Check your email. Anonymous. Nora's pulse quickened. She opened her email. There was a new message, no subject line, from an address she didn't recognize. The body of the email was blank except for a single attachment. She downloaded it. It was a video file. She pressed play. The footage was grainy, shot from a security camera in what looked like a hospital conference room. The timestamp read 3 days ago. There were 4 people in the room, Dr. Callahan, Dr. Strand, Helen Carmichael, and someone Nora didn't recognize, a man in a suit. The audio was muffled, but she could make out fragments of the conversation. Can't afford another incident. Reassignment isn't enough. Need to discredit her before this gets worse. Nora's blood ran cold. Strand's voice came through clearer. The article was a good start. But we need more. Something that sticks. The man in the suit leaned forward. Leave that to me. I can have something ready by the end of the week. Carmichael nodded. Do it. Quietly. The video ended. Nora stood in the hallway, phone clutched in her hand, heart pounding so hard she thought it might crack a rib. They weren't just trying to bury her. They were actively working to destroy her. She didn't sleep that night. She went through her shift on autopilot, checking charts, administering meds, keeping her face blank. But inside, she was screaming. When her shift ended at 7 a.m., she didn't go home. She went straight to Callahan's office. She didn't knock. She just walked in. Callahan looked up from his desk, startled. Hayes, what the hell? She slammed her phone down on his desk, the video already playing. He watched it. His face went pale. When it ended, he looked up at her. Where did you get this? Does it matter? Yes, it matters. This is proof that you've been conspiring to ruin me. Her voice was shaking. You, Strand, Carmichael, and whoever that suit is. Callahan stood up slowly. This isn't what it looks like. Really? Because it looks like you're trying to cover up the fact that your team screwed up, and I'm the one paying for it. His jaw tightened. You don't understand the pressure we're under. The hospital board, the military, the press, they're all watching. If we don't control the narrative... Control the narrative? Nora's voice rose. You mean lie. I mean protect this institution by throwing me under the bus. Callahan didn't respond. Nora grabbed her phone. I'm done. I'm going to the board. I'm going to the press. I'm going to anyone who will listen. Wait, Callahan's voice was sharp. If you do that, you'll destroy yourself. I'm already destroyed. No, you're not. Not yet. He stepped around the desk. But if you go public with this, you'll make enemies you can't afford. Powerful people. People who will bury you so deep you'll never work in medicine again. Nora stared at him. So what do you want me to do? Just take it? I want you to be smart. His voice softened just slightly. Let me handle this. Why should I trust you? Because I'm the only one who can fix this without burning everything down. She wanted to scream, wanted to tell him to go to hell, but she didn't, because part of her, the part that was tired, scared, and running on fumes, wanted to believe him. You have 24 hours, she said. Fix it, or I go public. She walked out before he could respond. That night, she sat in her apartment, staring at her phone. The video was still there, proof, leverage, a bomb waiting to go off. Jess sat down next to her. You okay? No? What are you going to do? Nora didn't answer. Her phone buzzed. Another message. This time from Callahan. It's done. Check the hospital intranet tomorrow morning. And Hayes, don't make me regret this. She stared at the message for a long time. Then she set the phone down and closed her eyes. The next morning, the hospital was in chaos. Nora heard it the moment she walked through the doors. Raised voices. People clustered in groups, phones out. She pushed through the crowd toward the nurse's station and saw Lila standing there, staring at a computer screen. What's going on? Lila looked up, eyes wide. You didn't see? See what? Lila turned the screen toward her. It was an official memo from the hospital administration. Nora scanned the text, heart pounding. Effective immediately, Dr. Monica Strand has been placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation into allegations of professional misconduct. Additionally, the hospital will be conducting a full review of protocols surrounding the General Marcus Hale case, with a focus on improving interdisciplinary communication and decision-making during high-pressure situations. Nora's breath caught. They're investigating Strand, Lila said, and they're changing the protocols because of you. Nora didn't respond. She just stared at the screen. Her phone buzzed, a text from Callahan. Told you I'd fix it? You're welcome. She should have felt relieved, vindicated even, but all she felt was hollow, because she knew this wasn't over, not even close. That afternoon, she was called into Carmichael's office again. This time, Carmichael wasn't alone. The man in the suit from the video was sitting next to her. Carmichael gestured to a chair. Sit. Nora sat. The man in the suit smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Miss Hayes, I'm Richard Bauer. I represent the hospital's legal team. Nora's stomach dropped. Bauer leaned forward. We've become aware that certain materials have come into your possession. Materials that could be damaging to this institution. Nora didn't blink. You mean the video? Yes. His smile widened. I'm here to make sure we're all on the same page. Which is? That video was obtained illegally. If you attempt to distribute it, you'll be opening yourself up to serious legal consequences. Criminal charges, civil suits, take your pick. Nora's hands clenched. You're threatening me. I'm informing you. Bauer's tone was pleasant, almost friendly. This hospital has invested a great deal in resolving this situation quietly. We've taken action, we've made changes, and in return, we expect your cooperation. Cooperation? Yes. Specifically, we expect you to delete that video, permanently, and to sign a non-disclosure agreement stating you will not discuss the details of this case with anyone outside this institution. Nora looked at Carmichael. And if I don't? Carmichael's expression was stone. Then we'll have no choice but to pursue legal action. Nora sat back. Her mind was racing. They had her cornered. If she went public, they'd sue her into oblivion. If she stayed quiet, they'd sweep everything under the rug, and she'd be right back where she started, silenced, sidelined, erased. Bauer pulled out a document, slid it across the desk. Sign this. Walk away. And we'll pretend none of this ever happened. Nora stared at the paper. Then she stood up. No. Bauer blinked. Excuse me? I'm not signing anything. Nora's voice was steady. And I'm not deleting the video. Carmichael's face went red. Hayes, you're making a mistake. Maybe. But it's my mistake to make. Nora looked at Bauer. You want to sue me? Go ahead. I'll see you in court. She walked out of the office, heart pounding, hands shaking. In the hallway, she pulled out her phone and dialed the number on the card General Hale had given her. He answered on the second ring. Hayes? I need help. A pause. Then, where are you? Hartford General, they're threatening to sue me. Don't move, I'll be there in 20 minutes. The line went dead. Nora leaned against the wall, closed her eyes, and waited. 20 minutes later, General Hale walked through the hospital's front entrance, flanked by 2 soldiers and a woman in a tailored suit carrying a briefcase. Nora met them in the lobby. Hale looked at her. Tell me everything. She did. The video, the threats, the NDA. When she finished, Hale turned to the woman in the suit. Can they do this? The woman, Hale introduced her as Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Vance, JAG Corps, smiled grimly. They can try, but they won't win. She looked at Nora. Do you still have the video? Yes. Good. Don't delete it. In fact, send it to me, right now. Nora hesitated. Why? Because if they want to play hardball, so will we. Vance's eyes were steel. General Hale is a federal employee. The care he received at this hospital is a matter of military record, which means any attempt to suppress evidence related to his treatment could be construed as obstruction. Hale nodded. Send it. Nora sent the video. Vance's phone buzzed. She checked it, nodded. Got it. She turned to Hale. Sir, with your permission, I'd like to contact the Inspector General's office. This goes beyond hospital politics. If they're actively trying to cover up systemic failures in trauma care, that's a federal issue. Hale's expression was hard. Do it. Vance pulled out her phone and walked away, already dialing. Hale looked at Nora. You're going to be okay. Am I? Yes, because now you're not fighting alone. Nora's throat tightened. She didn't trust herself to speak. Vance came back 5 minutes later. It's done. The IG is opening an investigation. They'll be here tomorrow. Nora's knees nearly gave out. Thank you, she whispered. Hale put a hand on her shoulder. You did the hard part. You stood up. Now let us handle the rest. They left, and Nora stood alone in the lobby, staring at nothing. Her phone buzzed. A text from Callahan. What the hell did you just do? She didn't respond. The next day, 2 investigators from the Inspector General's office arrived at Hartford General. By noon, the hospital was in lockdown. By evening, the news had broken. Nora watched it on her phone, sitting in her apartment, Jess next to her. The headline read, Federal investigation launched into Hartford General after whistleblower allegations. Jess grabbed her hand. You did it. Nora didn't feel like she'd done anything. She just felt tired. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. Miss Hayes? A woman's voice, calm and professional. Yes? This is Amanda Cross from the Washington Post. I'd like to talk to you about what happened at Hartford General. Nora closed her eyes. It was only just beginning. Nora hung up without saying a word. She set the phone down on the coffee table and stared at it like it might explode. Jess was already pacing. You're not seriously considering talking to the press? I don't know what I'm doing. Then don't do anything. Let the investigators handle it. Nora rubbed her face. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. Jess stopped, hands on her hips. You've already done enough. You saved a man's life. You exposed the people who tried to bury you. Now let the system work. The system doesn't work, Nora said quietly. That's the whole point. Her phone rang again, different number. She let it go to voicemail. Then another call. Another voicemail. By the time the sun went down, she had 14 missed calls and 23 unread emails. Every single one wanted a piece of her story. She turned off her phone and went to bed. She didn't sleep. The next morning, she walked into Hartford General at 6:45 a.m. for her shift and found a crowd of reporters camped outside the main entrance. Cameras, microphones, vans with satellite dishes. Someone spotted her and shouted her name. Miss Hayes, can you comment on the investigation? Did the hospital try to silence you? Is it true you were threatened? Nora kept her head down and pushed through the crowd. ignoring every question. Security guards flanked her, clearing a path. By the time she made it inside, her hands were shaking. The hospital felt like a war zone. Administrators hurried past with tight faces and locked jaws. Nurses whispered in corners. Doctors avoided eye contact. The Inspector General's team had set up shop in a commandeered conference room on the third floor, and throughout the day, staff were called in one by one for interviews. Nora's name was on the list. At 10 a.m., she was escorted to the conference room by a federal agent who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Inside, two investigators sat across a table, a man in his 50s with graying hair and reading glasses, and a woman in her 30s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense expression. The man gestured to a chair. "Miss Hayes, thank you for coming. I'm Agent Philip Cortez, and this is Agent Jennifer Rios. We're with the Department of Health and Human Services, Office of Inspector General." Nora sat down. "Okay." Rios leaned forward. "We've reviewed the video you provided to Lieutenant Colonel Vance. We've also reviewed hospital records, staff testimonies, and communications related to the Marcus Hale case." "And?" Cortez removed his glasses. "And we have significant concerns about how this institution handled both the medical emergency and the aftermath." Nora waited. "We need to understand exactly what happened," Rios said. "From your perspective. Start from the beginning." So Nora told them everything: the trauma bay, the flatline, the cricothyrotomy, the reassignment, the article, the video, the threats. When she finished, Cortez was writing notes. Rios was staring at her. "You performed a surgical airway procedure without authorization," Rios said. "Yes. That's a violation of protocol." "The patient was dead. Protocol doesn't apply to corpses." Rios almost smiled. "Fair point." Cortez looked up. "Did anyone instruct you to stay silent about what happened?" "Helen Carmichael told me to keep my head down. Dr. Callahan said the same thing." "Did they use those exact words?" Nora thought back. "Carmichael said I needed to be careful, that people were watching. Callahan told me not to let it go to my head." "And the video?" Rios asked. "The one showing the meeting where they discussed discrediting you. How did you obtain that?" "Someone sent it to me. Anonymous email." "Do you still have the email?" "Yes." "We'll need a copy." Nora pulled out her phone, forwarded the email. Rios's phone buzzed. She checked it, nodded. Cortez leaned back. "Miss Hayes, I want to be clear about something. What you did, stepping in when the surgical team failed, that took guts. But it also exposed a serious problem, not just with this hospital, with the entire way we train medical professionals to handle high-pressure situations." "I'm aware." "Are you?" His voice was gentle. "Because once this investigation goes public, you're going to be at the center of a national conversation about medical oversight, institutional accountability, and whistleblower protections. That's a heavy burden." Nora met his eyes. "I didn't ask for it." "No one ever does." Rios closed her notebook. "We'll be in touch. In the meantime, do not speak to the press. Do not discuss this case with anyone outside official channels. Understood?" "Understood." Nora stood up and walked out. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall and exhaled slowly. Her pager went off. She checked it. "Report to ICU. Stat." Her pulse quickened. She took the stairs two at a time, reached the ICU, and pushed through the doors. General Hale was sitting up in bed, oxygen cannula in his nose, looking irritated. A nurse was trying to adjust his IV line. He waved her off. "I'm fine. Stop fussing." The nurse looked relieved when she saw Nora. "He's asking for you." Nora approached the bed. "General?" Hale looked up. "There she is. The woman who started a war." "I didn't start anything." "Sure you did." He gestured to the chair next to the bed. "Sit. We need to talk." Nora sat. Hale studied her for a moment. "You look like hell." "Thanks. I mean it. When's the last time you slept?" "I don't remember." He grunted. "That's what I thought." He shifted in the bed, wincing. "Listen, I've been on the phone all morning. My people, DOD, the Secretary of Defense's office. Everyone's paying attention now. Is that good or bad?" "Depends." He paused. "The military's launching its own review of trauma care protocols. They want to know if what happened to me is an isolated incident or part of a larger pattern." Nora's stomach tightened. What do you think? I think we're about to find out. He looked at her. And I think you're going to be in the middle of it, whether you like it or not. I don't have a choice, do I? No. But you do have leverage. He leaned forward. You saved my life. That carries weight, more than you realize. People listen to heroes. I'm not a hero. You are to me. His voice was firm. And you're going to be one to a lot of other people, too. Once this story gets out, really gets out, you're going to have a platform. The question is what you do with it. Nora didn't respond. Hale sat back. I'm being discharged tomorrow. Moving to Walter Reed for follow-up care. But before I go, I want you to know something. If anyone, and I mean anyone, tries to intimidate you, threaten you, or silence you, you call me. Immediately. Clear? Clear. He extended his hand. She shook it. You're tougher than you think, he said. Don't let them convince you otherwise. Nora left the ICU and went back to her shift, but she couldn't focus. Her mind kept circling back to the same question. What the hell was she supposed to do now? The answer came faster than she expected. 2 days later, the Inspector General's office released a preliminary report. Nora found out about it when Jess called her at work, voice shaking. Turn on the news, now! Nora ducked into an empty patient room and pulled up a news stream on her phone. A reporter was standing outside Hartford General, mic in hand, camera crew behind her. Stunning developments today as federal investigators confirm that Hartford General Hospital is under formal investigation for multiple violations, including suppression of staff concerns, retaliation against a whistleblower, and systemic failures in trauma care protocols. The investigation was triggered by allegations brought forward by Nora Hayes, a trainee nurse who claims she was threatened and reassigned after saving the life of 4-star General Marcus Hale. Nora's vision blurred. The screen cut to footage of the hospital, administrators walking out with briefcases, staff refusing to comment, security blocking reporters. Then the anchor came back on. The Department of Health and Human Services has not yet released the full findings, but sources close to the investigation say the report is damning. We'll continue to follow this story as it develops. Nora's phone exploded with notifications, texts, emails, voicemails. She turned it off and sat down on the floor, back against the wall, head in her hands. It was out there now, all of it, and there was no taking it back. That night she got a call from Lieutenant Colonel Vance. Hayes, we need to move you. Nora blinked. What? You're not safe. Once the media identifies you, your address will be public within hours. We're arranging temporary accommodations. Military secured facility. You'll be there until this blows over. I can't just leave. You don't have a choice. Pack a bag. Someone will pick you up in 30 minutes. The line went dead. Nora stared at her phone. Then she started packing. Jess stood in the doorway, arms crossed. This is insane. I know. You're really going? I don't think I have a choice. Jess's face softened. Be careful. I will. 30 minutes later, a black SUV pulled up outside her apartment. 2 soldiers in plain clothes got out. One of them knocked on the door. Miss Hayes? Yeah. We're here to escort you. Let's go. She grabbed her bag, hugged Jess, and walked out. The drive took 40 minutes. They didn't speak. Nora stared out the window, watching the city disappear behind them. They pulled up to a nondescript building on the outskirts of town. 3 stories, no windows on the ground floor, surrounded by a chain-link fence. The gate opened and they drove through. Inside, the building was sterile. White walls, fluorescent lights, hallways that smelled like disinfectant. They took her to a small room on the 2nd floor, bed, desk, chair, bathroom. No TV, no phone line. One of the soldiers handed her a burner phone. You need anything, call this number, someone will answer. Then they left. Nora sat on the bed and stared at the wall. She stayed there for 3 days. No visitors, no updates. Just her and the sound of footsteps in the hallway. On the 4th day, Vance showed up. She walked into the room without knocking, carrying a folder. How are you holding up? I've been better. Vance sat down in the desk chair. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. The situation is escalating. The hospital is fighting back. They've hired a PR firm. They're leaking counter stories to the press. claiming you acted recklessly, that the cricothyrotomy was unnecessary, that you're exaggerating the threats you received. Nora's jaw tightened. That's bullshit. I know, but it's effective bullshit. Vance opened the folder. Here's where we stand. The IG has enough evidence to pursue charges against multiple hospital administrators, but proving retaliation and conspiracy is going to require your testimony in court. Nora's stomach dropped. Court. Yes, you'd be the key witness. The entire case hinges on you. And if I don't testify, then they walk. The hospital settles quietly, pays a fine, and nothing changes. Nora looked down at her hands. What if I testify and they destroy me? They'll try. Vance's voice was steady. But we'll protect you. Legally, financially, physically, if necessary. That's not the kind of protection I'm worried about. Vance leaned forward. I know what you're thinking, that this will define you, that you'll spend the rest of your life being the whistleblower instead of a nurse. And you're probably right. Nora looked up. But here's the thing, Vance continued. If you don't do this, nothing changes. The same system that tried to silence you will keep silencing others. The same arrogance that almost killed General Hale will kill someone else. And you'll spend the rest of your life knowing you could have stopped it. Nora closed her eyes. I need an answer, Vance said. Today. Nora sat there for a long time. Then she opened her eyes. I'll do it. Vance nodded. Good. We'll prep you starting tomorrow. She stood up and walked toward the door. Then she stopped. For what it's worth, you're doing the right thing. Doesn't feel like it. It never does. Vance left. Nora sat alone in the room, staring at the wall. The next 2 weeks were a blur of preparation. Lawyers, depositions, mock testimony. They drilled her on every detail, every timeline, every conversation. They taught her how to stay calm under cross-examination, how to handle hostile questions, how to keep her answers short and factual. It was exhausting, but it worked. By the time the hearing date arrived, Nora felt as ready as she'd ever be. The hearing was held in a federal courthouse downtown. Nora arrived in the same black SUV, flanked by the same 2 soldiers. Reporters swarmed the entrance. Cameras flashed. Someone shouted her name. She kept walking. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Hospital attorneys on one side, federal prosecutors on the other, journalists in the gallery. Nora sat at the witness table, hands folded, trying not to shake. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Eleanor Grant, called the room to order. This is a preliminary hearing to determine whether sufficient evidence exists to proceed with formal charges against Hartford General Hospital and associated parties. Miss Hayes, you've been called as a witness. Do you understand? Nora stood. Yes, Your Honor. Please be seated. The federal prosecutor, a sharp-eyed man named David Klein, stood up. Your Honor, we'd like to call Nora Hayes to testify. Nora walked to the witness stand. A clerk swore her in. She sat down. Klein approached. Miss Hayes, can you describe what happened on the night of November 12th? Nora took a breath. Then she started talking. She walked them through everything, the trauma bay, the flatline, the cricothyrotomy, the aftermath. When she finished, Klein nodded. And after you saved General Hale's life, what happened? I was reassigned, moved to night shift on a different floor. Did anyone tell you why? Helen Carmichael, the nursing director, said it was to protect me, but it felt like punishment. Did you feel silenced? Yes. Klein pulled out a document. I'm showing you Exhibit A, a video recording of a meeting between Dr. Eric Callahan, Dr. Monica Strand, Helen Carmichael, and Richard Bauer, the hospital's legal counsel. Do you recognize this? Yes. Someone sent it to me anonymously. What does the video show? It shows them discussing how to discredit me. Klein played the video. The courtroom went silent. When it ended, Klein turned to the judge. Your Honor, this clearly demonstrates a coordinated effort to suppress Miss Hayes' account and protect the hospital's reputation. The hospital's attorney, a slick man in an expensive suit named Gerald Pritchard, stood up. Objection. The video was obtained illegally. It should be inadmissible. Judge Grant looked at Klein. Counselor? The video was provided voluntarily by a third party. Miss Hayes did not solicit it, nor did she distribute it unlawfully. It's admissible under whistleblower protection statutes. Grant considered this. Overruled. The video stands. Pritchard's face darkened. Klein continued. Miss Hayes, after you received this video, what did you do? I confronted Dr. Callahan. Then I was called into a meeting with Helen Carmichael and Richard Bauer. They threatened me with legal action if I didn't sign an NDA and delete the video. What did you do? I refused. Then I contacted General Hale. And what did General Hale do? He connected me with Lieutenant Colonel Vance, who helped me report this to the Inspector General. Klein nodded. No further questions. Pritchard stood up. His smile was cold. Miss Hayes, you claim you saved General Hale's life. But isn't it true that you're not a licensed physician? I'm a registered nurse. A trainee nurse. With 6 months of experience. Yes. And yet you performed a surgical procedure, a cricothyrotomy, without supervision or authorization. The patient was dead. There was no one left to supervise. Or so you claim. Pritchard stepped closer. But the medical record shows that Dr. Callahan called the time of death at 12:19 a.m. You claim you intervened immediately after. But there's no documentation of your actions, no notes, no witness statements, just your word. Nora's pulse quickened. There were people in the room. People who were focused on their own tasks. People who didn't see what you claimed to have done. He paused. Isn't it possible you're exaggerating your role in order to gain attention? No. Isn't it possible the general's heart restarted on its own and you simply took credit? That's not what happened. How do you know? Because I was there. You saw what you wanted to see. Pritchard's voice was sharp. A young nurse, desperate to prove herself, looking for a moment of glory. And when that moment came, you seized it, regardless of the consequences. That's not true. Isn't it? He turned to the judge. Your Honor, this witness has a clear bias. She's not a neutral party. She's a disgruntled employee with an axe to grind. Klein shot to his feet. Objection. Counsel is badgering the witness. Sustained. Judge Grant looked at Pritchard. Move on. Pritchard smiled. No further questions. Nora stepped down, legs shaking. She walked back to her seat and sat down. Klein leaned over. You did fine. She didn't feel fine. The hearing continued for 3 more hours. Other witnesses were called. Nurses, residents, administrators. The hospital's attorneys attacked every claim, questioned every timeline, cast doubt on every piece of evidence. By the time Judge Grant called for recess, Nora felt like she'd been run over. Outside the courtroom, Vance pulled her aside. That was rough, but you held up. He made me sound like a liar. That's his job. Don't let it get to you. Easy for you to say. Vance's expression softened. I know it doesn't feel like it, but you're winning. The video is solid. The testimony is solid. They're scared. They don't look scared. They will. The hearing resumed the next day. This time, the prosecution called Dr. Eric Callahan to the stand. Callahan looked uncomfortable. He answered questions carefully, precisely, choosing every word like it might explode. Klein stood up. Dr. Callahan, you were the lead surgeon on General Hale's case. Is that correct? Yes. And you called the time of death at 12:19 a.m. Yes. Why? Callahan hesitated. The patient had been in cardiac arrest for over 3 minutes. We'd administered multiple rounds of epinephrine. We'd shocked him twice. There was no response. By all medical standards, he was gone. But he wasn't gone, was he? No. Because Miss Hayes intervened. Callahan's jaw tightened. Yes. Did you authorize her to perform the cricothyrotomy? No. Did you stop her? No. Why not? Callahan looked at Nora. His face was unreadable. Because I thought she might be right. The courtroom stirred. Klein leaned in. You thought she might be right, even though she was a trainee nurse with no surgical training. Yes. Why? Callahan exhaled slowly. Because I'd missed something, and she saw it. Pritchard stood up. Objection? Speculation? Judge Grant shook her head. Overruled. The witness is describing his own thought process. Klein continued. Dr. Callahan, after General Hale survived, did you recommend Miss Hayes for commendation? No. Why not? Because because it would have raised questions. What kind of questions? Callahan looked down. Questions about why we missed the airway in the first place. So you stayed silent to protect yourself. I stayed silent to protect the team. And in doing so, you allowed Miss Hayes to be reassigned and discredited. Callahan didn't respond. No further questions. Pritchard stood up for cross-examination, but before he could speak, Callahan turned to the judge. Your Honor, may I say something? Grant raised an eyebrow. This is highly irregular. I know, but I need to say it. She nodded. Go ahead. Callahan looked at Nora. I was wrong. I should have stood up for you. I should have told the truth from the beginning, but I didn't. And I'm sorry. The courtroom went dead silent. Pritchard sat down, face pale. Klein smiled. Judge Grant leaned back. The court appreciates your honesty, Dr. Callahan. You're dismissed. Callahan stepped down and walked out. He didn't look back. The hearing wrapped up 2 hours later. Judge Grant reviewed the evidence, conferred with her clerk, and returned to the bench. Based on the testimony and evidence presented, this court finds sufficient cause to proceed with formal charges against Hartford General Hospital for retaliation, suppression of whistleblower testimony, and systemic failures in medical oversight. Trial date will be set within 60 days. She banged the gavel. The courtroom erupted. Nora sat frozen, staring at the judge's bench. They'd won. Vance grabbed her shoulder. You did it! Nora couldn't speak. Outside, reporters swarmed. Cameras flashed. Someone shoved a microphone in her face. Miss Hayes, how do you feel? She looked at the camera. Then she walked past without answering. Back in the SUV, Vance handed her a phone. You have a message. Nora took it. One voicemail. She pressed play. General Hale's voice came through, steady and warm. Hayes, I just heard. You did good. Real good. I'm proud of you. And when this is over, we need to talk. I have an idea I think you're going to like. Call me. The message ended. Nora stared at the phone. Then she smiled. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she could breathe. The celebration didn't last long. That night, back in the secured facility, Nora was lying in bed when her burner phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. Hello? Breathing on the other end. Then a voice, low, distorted, mechanical. You made a mistake. Nora sat up. Who is this? You think you won. You didn't. You just made enemies, powerful ones. Her pulse hammered. What do you want? I want you to understand something. This doesn't end in a courtroom. It ends when we say it does. The line went dead. Nora stared at the phone, heart pounding. Then the lights in the building went out. Nora's breath caught. The darkness was absolute. No emergency lights, no exit signs, nothing. Just black. She fumbled for the burner phone, hands shaking, and jabbed at the screen. The glow gave her just enough light to see the door. She moved toward it, each step careful, deliberate. The hallway outside was equally dark, silent, too silent. She pressed the phone to her ear and dialed the number the soldiers had given her. It rang and rang. No answer. Her pulse hammered. She tried again, still nothing. Then she heard it. Footsteps. Slow, measured, coming from the stairwell at the end of the hall. Nora backed into her room, shut the door as quietly as she could, and locked it. Her mind raced. The building was supposed to be secure, military-controlled. There were guards downstairs, cameras everywhere. Unless they'd already been dealt with. She moved to the window. It didn't open, reinforced glass, probably bulletproof. She was on the second floor. Even if she could break it, the fall would hurt. The footsteps stopped, right outside her door. A knock. 3 times. Calm. Almost polite. Nora didn't move. A voice came through the door, different from the one on the phone, real, human, male. Miss Hayes, open the door. She stayed silent. We're not here to hurt you. We just want to talk. Talk through the door, she said, voice steadier than she felt. A pause. Then, fine. You've caused a lot of problems for a lot of people. Important people. People who don't like being embarrassed. That's not my problem. Actually, it is. See, you've got 2 choices. You can walk away from this, drop the case, sign the NDA, disappear, or you can keep pushing, and things get a lot worse for you. You mean worse than breaking into a federal facility and threatening a witness? A low chuckle. You think this is a federal facility? Look around. No guards, no cameras, just you and us. Nora's stomach dropped. So here's what's going to happen, the voice continued. You're going to open this door, we're going to have a conversation, and then you're going to make the smart choice. Nora looked at the phone in her hand. Still no signal. Whoever these people were, they'd cut everything. Power, communications, maybe even the guards. She was alone, but she wasn't helpless. She moved to the desk, grabbed the chair, and wedged it under the door handle. It wouldn't hold long, but it would buy time. Then she heard a sound that made her blood freeze. A keycard swipe. The lock disengaging. The door pushed open. An inch, 2 inches, then stopped against the chair. Really? The voice said. We're doing this? The door slammed open. The chair splintered. 2 men stepped inside, both dressed in black, faces covered. Nora backed against the wall. One of them raised a hand. Easy. We're not going to hurt you. We're just here to deliver a message. I already got your message. No, you got a warning. This is different. He pulled out a tablet, tapped the screen, and turned it toward her. The screen showed a live feed. Jess, her roommate, sitting in their apartment watching TV, completely unaware. Nora's vision blurred. You son of a... Relax. She's fine. For now. He lowered the tablet. But if you keep talking, if you keep testifying, if you keep being a problem, she won't be. Nora's hands clenched into fists. You're threatening her. I'm giving you options. Drop the case. Sign the NDA. Move on with your life, or keep fighting, and everyone you care about suffers. Who sent you? The man smiled behind his mask. Does it matter? Before Nora could respond, a sound echoed through the building. Loud, sharp, a gunshot. The 2 men froze. Then another shot, closer. The man with the tablet swore. We're out of time. Think about what I said. They turned and ran. Nora stood there shaking as footsteps pounded down the hallway. Then voices, shouting, commands. Federal agents, hands up! Lights flooded the building, emergency power kicking in. Nora stumbled to the door and looked out. The hallway was swarming with agents in tactical gear. One of them saw her and jogged over. Miss Hayes, are you hurt? No, but there were 2 men. We got them. They're in custody. The agent gestured down the hall. Lieutenant Colonel Vance is downstairs. She wants to see you. Nora followed him down to the first floor. Vance was standing near the entrance, talking into a radio. When she saw Nora, she ended the call and walked over. What the hell happened? Nora told her. The phone call, the power outage, the men in her room, the threat against Jess. Vance's face went hard. We've got a team en route to your apartment. Your roommate will be safe. Who were they? We're working on that. But whoever hired them made a big mistake. Threatening a federal witness is a felony. Entering a secured facility is another. They just handed us more ammunition. Nora leaned against the walls. And this isn't going to stop, is it? Not until we make it stop. Vance's voice was firm. But now they've escalated. And that means we can too. The next morning, Nora woke up in a different facility. An actual federal safe house this time, with armed guards and working communications. Jess was already there, looking shaken but unharmed. She hugged Nora so hard it hurt. They came to the apartment, Jess said. Federal agents told me to pack a bag. They wouldn't say why. I'm sorry. This is my fault. Stop. This is not on you. Jess pulled back, hands on Nora's shoulders. You didn't do anything wrong. They did. Agent Rios walked in, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Nora. The men from last night are talking, both of them. Private contractors hired through an intermediary. They claim they don't know who the client was, but we're tracing the payments. How long will that take? Not long. Whoever hired them wasn't as careful as they thought. Rios sat down. In the meantime, you're both staying here, no exceptions. Nora nodded. What about the trial? Still on track, Judge Grant expedited the schedule after last night. She's not happy. And when judges aren't happy, bad things happen to defendants. 2 days later, the payments were traced. The intermediary cracked under pressure and gave up the name. Richard Bauer, the hospital's legal counsel. The news broke that afternoon. Nora watched it on the TV in the safe house, Jess sitting next to her. A reporter stood outside the federal courthouse, looking stunned. In a shocking development, Richard Bauer, the chief legal counsel for Hartford General Hospital, has been arrested on charges of witness intimidation, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. According to sources, Bauer allegedly hired private contractors to threaten Nora Hayes, the whistleblower at the center of the hospital scandal. If convicted, Bauer faces up to 20 years in federal prison. The screen cut to footage of Bauer being led out of the courthouse in handcuffs, reporters shouting questions. He said nothing, just kept his head down. Jess whistled. They got him. One of them, Nora said quietly. The trial began 3 weeks later. The courtroom was packed again, but this time the energy was different. The hospital's legal team looked rattled. Pritchard's usual confidence was gone, replaced by something tighter, more defensive. Judge Grant called the court to order and looked at the prosecution. Mr. Klein, you may proceed. Klein stood. Your Honor, the prosecution calls Richard Bauer. Bauer was brought in wearing a suit, no handcuffs, but flanked by marshals. He took the stand, was sworn in, and sat down. Klein approached. Mr. Bauer, you are currently facing federal charges for witness intimidation. Is that correct? Bauer's attorney leaned forward. My client invokes his Fifth Amendment right. Actually, Bauer said, cutting him off, I'd like to make a statement. His attorney's face went white. Richard, I strongly advise I'm done listening to advice. Bauer looked at the judge. Your Honor, I'd like to cooperate with the prosecution in exchange for a reduced sentence. The courtroom erupted. Pritchard shot to his feet. Objection. This is... Grant banged her gavel. Order. Mr. Pritchard, sit down. She looked at Bauer. You're offering testimony? Yes, Your Honor. Full disclosure. Everything I know. Klein didn't miss a beat. Mr. Bauer, who instructed you to intimidate Miss Hayes? Bauer took a breath. Dr. Patricia Voss. She's on the hospital's board of directors. She orchestrated the entire cover-up. The courtroom went silent. Klein leaned in. Can you elaborate? Voss wanted the Marcus Hale incident buried. She was afraid it would trigger a full investigation into the hospital's trauma protocols, which would expose years of negligence. So she told me to neutralize the threat. Discredit Hayes, silence her, whatever it took. And you agreed? Yes. Why? Bauer's jaw tightened. Because I was paid to protect the hospital. That's my job. Your job is to uphold the law. My job is to win. The law is just a tool. Klein stepped back. No further questions. Pritchard stood for cross-examination, but his heart wasn't in it. He asked a few perfunctory questions, then sat down. Judge Grant looked at the prosecution. Call your next witness. Klein nodded. We call Dr. Patricia Voss. Marshals moved toward the gallery. Voss stood up, composed, perfectly dressed. She walked to the stand like she was walking into a board meeting. She was sworn in, sat down. Klein didn't waste time. Dr. Voss, Mr. Bauer has testified that you instructed him to intimidate Miss Hayes. Is that true? Voss smiled. Absolutely not. He's lying? He's desperate. He's facing prison time, so he's trying to shift blame. Did you meet with Mr. Bauer on November 20th? I meet with Mr. Bauer regularly. He's the hospital's legal counsel. Did you discuss Miss Hayes during that meeting? Voss hesitated, just a fraction of a second. We may have discussed her, briefly. What did you say? I don't recall the specifics. Klein pulled out a document. I'm showing you Exhibit F, a recording of a phone call between you and Mr. Bauer on November 20th. Would you like to hear it? Voss's face went pale. Your Honor, may I play the recording? Grant nodded. Klein pressed play. Voss's voice came through, clear and sharp. I don't care how you do it. Just make her go away. Permanently. Bauer's voice. Permanently? Voss. Not literally. Just neutralize her. Discredit her. Make sure she never works in medicine again. The recording ended. The courtroom was dead silent. Voss stared at the speaker, face frozen. Klein turned to the judge. No further questions. Grant looked at Voss. Do you have anything to say? Voss's mouth opened, closed. Then she stood up and walked out of the courtroom. Marshals grabbed her before she reached the door. Grant banged her gavel. Doctor, Patricia Voss, you are hereby held in contempt of court. Marshals, take her into custody. Voss struggled, just for a second. Then she stopped. Let them cuff her. Let them lead her away. Nora watched from the gallery, hands clenched, heart pounding. It was over. The trial continued for 2 more days, but the outcome was inevitable. The jury deliberated for 3 hours and returned with a verdict. Guilty on all counts. Hartford General was fined $12 million. Doctor, Voss was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Bauer got 6. Helen Carmichael resigned. Dr. Strand's medical license was suspended pending review, and Nora Hayes became a name everyone knew. The day after the verdict, Nora sat in the safe house staring at her phone. Messages, hundreds of them, job offers, interview requests, speaking invitations. Jess sat next to her. What are you going to do? I don't know. Her phone rang. General Hale. She answered. General? Hayes. Congratulations. Thanks. I meant what I said. I have an idea for you. What kind of idea? The kind that puts you where you belong. Come to Walter Reed tomorrow. We'll talk. The next day, Nora took a train to Washington. She'd never been to Walter Reed before. The facility was massive, sprawling campus, modern buildings, security everywhere. General Hale met her in the lobby. He looked stronger now, healthier. He smiled when he saw her. Right on time? What's this about? Walk with me. They walked through the hospital, past wards and clinics, until they reached a conference room. Hale opened the door. Inside were a dozen people, military officers, civilian officials, medical administrators. Hale gestured to a chair. Sit. Nora sat. Hale stood at the head of the table. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Nora Hayes, the woman who saved my life, and the woman who exposed systemic failures in civilian trauma care. He turned to Nora. We're creating a new program, a joint military-civilian initiative to overhaul trauma protocols across the country. Training, oversight, accountability, and we want you to help design it. Nora blinked. What? One of the officers, a colonel, leaned forward. You've seen the problem from the inside. You know what works and what doesn't. We need that perspective. I'm just a nurse. You're the nurse who was right when everyone else was wrong, Hale said. That's exactly who we need. Nora looked around the table, all eyes on her. What would this involve? Advisory role initially, the colonel said. Consulting on protocol development. Eventually, if you're interested, we'd bring you on full time. Decent salary, benefits, and the chance to actually change things. Nora sat back. Can I think about it? Take your time, Hale said, but not too much. We're moving fast. She left the meeting in a daze, rode the train back home, sat in the safe house, staring at the wall. Jess found her there an hour later. You okay? They want me to help redesign trauma care. Nah, nationally. Jess's eyes went wide. Holy shit. Yeah. Are you going to do it? Nora didn't answer right away. Then she looked at Jess. I think I have to. 2 weeks later, Nora moved to Washington. The safe house restrictions were lifted. Jess went back to their apartment. Nora found a small studio near Walter Reed and started her new job. It was overwhelming. Meetings, briefings, policy reviews. But for the first time in months, she felt like she was doing something that mattered. 3 months in, she got a call from Dr. Callahan. She almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Hayes? It's Callahan. Silence. I just wanted to say, you were right about everything. And I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. Nora closed her eyes. Okay. I resigned from Hartford General. I'm doing consulting work now, helping hospitals improve their protocols. I thought you should know. Why are you telling me this? Because I owe you, and because I hope someday you can forgive me. Nora didn't respond. Callahan sighed. Take care of yourself, Hayes. The line went dead. Nora set the phone down and stared out the window. Forgiveness. Maybe someday, but not yet. 6 months after the trial, Nora was invited to speak at a national medical conference in Chicago. The topic, whistleblowing and medical accountability. She stood backstage, heart pounding, watching the crowd file in. Thousands of people. Doctors, nurses, administrators. A stage manager approached. "You're on in 2 minutes." Nora nodded. She walked onto the stage. The lights were blinding. The applause was deafening. She stepped up to the microphone and looked out at the sea of faces. Then she spoke. "6 months ago, I was a trainee nurse who nobody listened to. Today I'm standing here because I refuse to stay silent. This isn't a story about heroism. It's a story about what happens when systems fail and what happens when someone finally says enough." She paused. "I didn't set out to change anything. I just wanted to save a life. But in doing that, I exposed something bigger, a culture of arrogance, a hierarchy that silences the people who see the truth, and a system that protects itself at the expense of patients." The room was silent. "We can do better. We have to do better. Because the next time someone sees something wrong, they need to know they can speak up, and they need to know they'll be heard." The applause started slowly, then it built. Standing ovation. Nora stood there, hands gripping the podium, trying not to cry. After the conference, she flew back to Washington, exhausted but lighter, somehow. She got back to her apartment at midnight, unlocked the door, stepped inside, and froze. Someone was sitting in her living room. The lights were off. Just a silhouette in the chair by the window. Nora's hand went to her phone. The figure stood up, stepped into the light. It was Dr. Monica Strand. Nora's pulse spiked. "How did you get in here?" Strand smiled, thin, cold. Locks are easier to pick than reputations. "Get out, now." "Relax. I'm not here to hurt you." Strand took a step closer. "I'm here to offer you a deal." "I'm not interested." "You should be. See, my suspension was lifted last week. Turns out being a scapegoat only works if people care, and they don't. Not anymore." Nora's jaw tightened. "What do you want?" Strand pulled out an envelope, set it on the table. Inside is a list. Names, dates, evidence, proof that the Hartford General scandal wasn't isolated. It's happening at hospitals across the country. And the people responsible? They're still out there. Nora stared at the envelope. "Why are you giving this to me?" "Because you won, and I lost. And if I'm going down, I'm taking everyone else with me." Strand's smile widened. "So, here's the deal. You take that list, you expose them, you become the hero again, and I get to watch the whole thing burn." She walked to the door, stopped, looked back. "Or you can ignore it, pretend everything's fine. Go back to your meetings and your speeches and your perfect little redemption arc." She opened the door. "Your choice." Then she was gone. Nora stood alone in her apartment, staring at the envelope on the table. Her hands were shaking. She picked it up, opened it. Inside were dozens of pages. Hospital names, administrator names, incident reports, cover-ups. All of it documented. All of it real. Nora sat down on the couch, papers spread across her lap, and she started reading. The first page made her stomach turn. Baltimore Memorial Hospital. A surgical resident noticed a pattern of post-op infections in the cardiac unit. She reported it. 3 weeks later, she was fired for performance issues. The infections continued for another 6 months. 4 patients died. The second page was worse. St. Augustine Medical Center in Phoenix. A nurse flagged a doctor for performing unnecessary procedures to inflate billing. The hospital buried the complaint. The doctor kept operating. Insurance fraud running into millions, page after page. Different cities, different hospitals, same story. People spoke up. People got crushed. Nora read until her eyes burned, until the sun came up, until she couldn't read anymore. Then she called General Hale. He answered on the first ring. "Hayes, it's 6 in the morning. I need to see you, today." A pause. "What's wrong?" "Everything." 2 hours later, she was sitting in Hale's office at Walter Reed, the envelope on his desk. He'd read through half of it, face growing darker with each page. Finally, he set the papers down and looked at her. "Where did you get this?" "Monica Strand. She showed up at my apartment last night." Hale's jaw tightened. "And you believe her?" I don't trust her motives, but the evidence is real. I cross-checked 3 of these cases online. They all happened. They're all documented. Hale leaned back. So Strand's trying to blow up the entire healthcare system to get revenge. Basically. And she handed you the detonator. Nora nodded. Hale was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood up, walked to the window, and stared out at the hospital grounds. You know what happens if you go public with this, right? Hartford General was one hospital. This is dozens, maybe hundreds. You'll be fighting an entire industry. I know. They'll come after you harder than before. Lawsuits, smear campaigns, threats. And this time they'll have more resources. I know. He turned to face her. Then why are you even considering it? Nora looked down at her hands. Because if I don't, nothing changes. Hartford General gets reformed, everyone pats themselves on the back, and in 5 years we're right back here. Different hospital, different victim, same system. Hale studied her. You sound tired. I am tired. I'm exhausted. But I'm also the only person who has this information and the platform to use it. That doesn't mean you have to. Doesn't it? Nora met his eyes. You told me I had a responsibility, that I had proof I was right and I needed to use it. This is the same thing, bigger, but the same. Hale crossed his arms. I also told you to be smart. This isn't smart. This is walking into a buzzsaw. Then help me build a shield. He stared at her. Then he smiled, small but genuine. You've got guts, Hayes, I'll give you that. Is that a yes? It's a, let me make some calls. He picked up his phone. But if we're doing this, we're doing it right. No leaks, no half measures. We build an airtight case, then we drop it all at once. How long will that take? Months? Maybe longer. Nora nodded. Then we start now. For the next 4 months, Nora's life became a blur of investigation and verification. She worked with a team assembled by Hale, military lawyers, federal investigators, forensic accountants, even a few journalists who specialized in healthcare corruption. They went through every case in Strand's list, cross-referenced incident reports with employment records, tracked down whistleblowers who'd been silenced, pulled financial data from hospitals that had settled cases quietly. The deeper they dug, the worse it got. One hospital in Denver had covered up 3 surgical deaths by altering medical records. Another in Miami had a policy of blacklisting nurses who filed safety complaints. A third in Boston had executives who received bonuses for keeping malpractice settlements under a certain threshold, creating a direct financial incentive to bury problems instead of fixing them. It was systematic, institutional, and it was everywhere. Nora spent most nights in her apartment, surrounded by files, surviving on coffee and takeout. Jess flew down twice to check on her, both times finding Nora looking thinner and more hollowed out. You're killing yourself, Jess said on the second visit. I'm finishing what I started. You already finished. You won. This is something else. Nora looked up from her laptop. What would you do? Jess sat down across from her. Honestly, I don't know, but I do know you can't save everyone. I'm not trying to save everyone. I'm trying to stop the people who are killing them. There's a difference? Yeah. One's impossible. The other's just really hard. Jess shook her head. You're insane. Probably. But she kept working. 3 months in, they had enough. Verified cases at 47 hospitals across 18 states. Documented cover-ups. Whistleblowers willing to testify. Financial records showing patterns of fraud and retaliation. Hale called a meeting with the Department of Justice. Nora wasn't invited. She was a witness, not a prosecutor. But Hale briefed her afterward. They're taking it seriously. Opening a task force. Multi-agency investigation. When does it go public? 2 weeks. They want to coordinate arrests first. Nora felt something loosen in her chest. It's really happening. It's really happening. Hale paused. But there's a catch. What? DOJ wants you to testify before Congress, public hearing, national spotlight. They want to use you as the face of the investigation. Nora's stomach dropped. Why me? Because you're credible. Because you survived Hartford General and came out the other side. Because people trust you. I don't want to be the face of anything. I know. But this is bigger than what you want. This is about making sure the people responsible can't hide. Nora closed her eyes. When? 3 weeks. She opened her eyes. Okay. The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning. Nora flew to Washington the night before and stayed in a hotel near Capitol Hill. She didn't sleep, just sat by the window, watching the lights of the city, trying to calm the storm in her chest. The next morning, she put on a suit Jess had helped her pick out. Simple, professional, nothing flashy. She tied her hair back, looked at herself in the mirror. She barely recognized the person staring back. The Capitol building was intimidating in a way she hadn't expected. Marble floors, vaulted ceilings, security everywhere. She was escorted to a waiting room outside the hearing chamber, where she sat alone, hands folded, trying not to think. Then the door opened and General Hale walked in. Thought you could use some company. Nora exhaled. Thanks. He sat down next to her. Nervous? Terrified. Good. Means you're taking it seriously. He looked at her. You know what you're going to say? I've got notes? Forget the notes. Just tell the truth. That's all they need to hear. What if the truth isn't enough? It will be, because you're not just talking about policy or statistics. You're talking about people, real people who got hurt because someone decided their career was more important than a patient's life. Nora nodded. A clerk poked her head in. Miss Hayes, they're ready for you. Nora stood up. Hale stood with her. You've got this, he said. She walked into the hearing chamber. It was massive. Rows of seats filled with journalists, advocates, hospital representatives. A panel of senators sat at the front, elevated on a platform. Cameras lined the walls. Nora walked to the witness table, was sworn in, and sat down. The chairman, a silver-haired senator from Ohio named Andrew Kellerman, leaned into his microphone. Miss Hayes, thank you for being here. We've reviewed your written testimony, and I think I speak for the entire committee when I say we're deeply troubled by what you've uncovered. Nora nodded. Thank you, Senator. Let's start with a simple question. In your own words, what did you see at Hartford General Hospital? Nora took a breath. I saw a system that valued reputation over lives. I saw doctors who were more concerned with covering their mistakes than learning from them. And I saw people who tried to speak up get punished for it. Can you give us a specific example? Yes. When I saved General Hale's life, the surgical team had missed a collapsed airway. It was a simple thing, something that should have been caught in the initial assessment, but they were so focused on the obvious injuries that they ignored the subtle signs. And when I pointed it out, instead of thanking me, they tried to bury me. Kellerman's expression hardened. Why do you think that is? Because admitting I was right meant admitting they were wrong. And in a place like Hartford General, being wrong is worse than letting someone die. The room went silent. A senator from California, a woman named Victoria Ruiz, leaned forward. Miss Hayes, you've provided evidence of similar incidents at dozens of hospitals. Do you believe this is a widespread problem? I don't believe it. I know it. I've seen the reports. I've talked to the whistleblowers. This isn't a few bad apples. This is a cultural rot that runs through the entire healthcare system. Ruiz nodded. What do you think needs to change? Nora looked at her notes. Then she set them aside. We need to stop treating whistleblowers like traitors. We need to stop protecting institutions at the expense of patients. And we need to create real consequences for the people who bury complaints, alter records, and retaliate against staff who speak up. She paused. But most importantly, we need to change the culture. Because right now the message is clear. Stay quiet. Keep your head down. Don't make waves. And as long as that's the message, people will keep dying. The hearing lasted 3 hours. Senators asked questions. Nora answered them. Hospital lobbyists tried to discredit her. She held her ground. When it was over, she walked out of the chamber exhausted but steady. Hale was waiting in the hallway. You killed it. Did I? You made half those senators cry. The other half looked like they wanted to throw someone in jail. Yeah, you killed it. Nora almost smiled. The fallout was immediate. Within 48 hours, the DOJ announced indictments against 14 hospital administrators across the country. Charges ranged from fraud to obstruction of justice to racketeering. The media exploded. Every major outlet ran stories. Nora's testimony went viral. Clips of her speaking circulated on social media, racking up millions of views. And hospitals started changing, new policies, new oversight, whistleblower protections. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever is, but it was a start. Nora watched it all from her apartment, feeling like she was floating somewhere outside her own body. Then, 2 weeks after the hearing, she got a call from an unknown number. She answered. "Hello? Miss Hayes, this is Dr. Eleanor Grant." Nora sat up. Judge Grant, the woman who'd presided over the Hartford General trial. "Your Honor, I didn't expect to hear from you. I'm calling in an unofficial capacity. I wanted to let you know that I've been appointed to lead a federal task force on healthcare accountability, and I'd like you to join." Nora blinked. "Join how?" "As a senior advisor, you'd help design new protocols, review cases, and work with hospitals to implement reforms. It's a 5-year commitment, full-time, good salary." Nora's mind raced. "Why me?" "Because you understand this issue in a way most people don't. You've lived it, you've fought it, and you've proven you're not afraid to stand up to power." "I'm just a nurse." "You're the nurse who changed everything." Grant's voice was firm. "So what do you say?" Nora looked around her apartment, at the files still stacked on her desk, at the life she'd built out of chaos. "Can I think about it?" "Of course, but not too long. We're moving fast." Nora hung up and sat in silence. Then she called Jess. "They offered me a job." "Who did?" "A federal task force. They want me to help oversee healthcare reforms. Nationally." Jess was quiet for a moment, then, "Are you going to take it?" "I don't know. It's 5 years. It's a lot." "You've already done a lot." "Yeah." "So the question is, do you want to keep doing it?" Nora thought about that, about the whistleblowers she'd met, the patients who'd died because someone stayed silent, the people who were still out there fighting systems that didn't care. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I think I do." "Then take the job." Nora smiled. "Okay." She called Grant back the next day and accepted. 3 months later, Nora was sitting in a conference room in Washington, surrounded by policy experts and medical administrators, reviewing a draft of new federal guidelines for whistleblower protections in healthcare. It was dry work, technical, but it mattered. One of the administrators, a sharp-eyed woman named Karen Lim, looked up from her notes. "This section on retaliation penalties, you really think hospitals will comply?" "Not without enforcement," Nora said, "but that's why we're building in mandatory reporting and third-party audits. That's going to be expensive." "So is letting people die." Lim smiled. "Fair point." After the meeting, Nora walked back to her office, a small room with a window overlooking the Potomac. She sat down at her desk and stared at the river. Her phone buzzed. A text from General Hale. "Dinner tonight?" "My treat. You've earned it." Nora smiled and typed back. "Sure." "Where?" "Usual place. 7 p.m. She arrived at the restaurant, a quiet Italian place near Walter Reed, and found Hale already seated, looking healthier than she'd ever seen him. He stood when she approached. "Hayes." "General." They sat down, ordered food, made small talk. Then Hale set down his glass and looked at her. "I wanted to say something, officially." "Okay." "You saved my life, and then you did something harder. You used that moment to save a lot of other lives. That takes courage most people don't have." Nora looked down. "I just did what needed to be done." "That's what courage is, doing what needs to be done even when it costs you." She met his eyes. "It did cost me. A lot." "I know, and I'm sorry for that. But I hope you also know that what you did mattered, not just for me, for everyone." Nora's throat tightened. "Thank you." They ate in comfortable silence. When the check came, Hale grabbed it before Nora could reach. "I said my treat." "You always say that." "And I always mean it." Outside, they stood on the sidewalk, the city lights glowing around them. Hale extended his hand. "Stay in touch, Hayes." She shook it. "I will." He walked to his car. She watched him go. Then she turned and started walking. No destination, just walking. The streets were quiet. The air was cool. And for the first time in over a year, Nora felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not because everything was fixed, it wasn't. There were still hospitals covering up mistakes, still administrators protecting their own, still whistleblowers getting crushed. But she'd proven something important, that one person could make a difference, that speaking up mattered, that the system could be fought, and sometimes beaten. She walked for an hour, then took the metro back to her apartment. When she got home, she found a package waiting at her door. No return address. Just her name. She opened it carefully. Inside was a framed photograph. It took her a second to recognize it, the trauma bay at Hartford General. The moment the monitor came back to life, beep, beep, beep. Someone had captured it, frozen it. There was a note attached. You gave me years I shouldn't have had. I'll spend them making sure what happened to you never happens to anyone else. MH. Nora set the photo on her desk and stared at it. Then she sat down and opened her laptop. There was work to do. 6 months later, the reforms started rolling out. Hospitals across the country implemented new whistleblower protections, mandatory reporting systems, independent oversight boards. It wasn't perfect. Some places fought it. Some places ignored it, but enough places followed through that it made a difference. Nora saw the results in the reports that crossed her desk. Fewer retaliation cases, more complaints being taken seriously, lives saved because someone spoke up and someone else listened. It was slow. It was messy. But it was real. One afternoon, she got an email from a nurse in Oregon, a woman she'd never met. Miss Hayes, I just wanted to say thank you. Last week, I noticed a medication error that could have killed a patient. I reported it. My supervisor tried to brush it off, but I pushed back and cited the new federal guidelines. They investigated. They fixed it. A year ago, I would have stayed quiet. I would have been too scared to speak up, but I saw what you did. And I thought, if she can do it, so can I. So thank you. You saved more than one life. Nora read the email 3 times. Then she saved it in a folder labeled Why This Matters. The folder was getting full. That night, she met Jess for dinner. They sat at a corner table in a small bistro, wine glasses in hand, talking about nothing important. Then Jess leaned back and studied her. You look different. Different how? I don't know. Lighter, maybe. Nora thought about that. I feel lighter. Good. You've earned it. They clinked glasses. Later, walking home, Nora stopped in front of a hospital. Not Hartford General, just a random hospital. She stood there watching people come and go, patients, doctors, nurses. She wondered how many of them were struggling, how many had seen something wrong and stayed silent, how many were one decision away from being where she'd been. And she hoped, really hoped, that if they ever needed to speak up, they'd remember her story. Not because she was special, but because she was proof. Proof that the smallest voice in the room could change everything. Proof that doing the right thing, even when it cost everything, was worth it. Proof that the system could be beaten. She turned and kept walking. Somewhere behind her, a monitor beeped. Steady, strong, alive. The following year brought changes Nora hadn't anticipated. The task force expanded. More staff, more resources, more hospitals joining the reform initiative voluntarily rather than waiting for federal mandates. She traveled constantly. Chicago, Los Angeles, Seattle, Miami. Meeting with hospital boards, training administrators, speaking at conferences. And everywhere she went, people wanted to hear the story. Not the sanitized version, the real one. So she told it, over and over. The trauma bay, the flat line, the choice she made, the consequences. Some people listened and nodded politely. Others listened and changed. In Atlanta, a hospital CEO approached her after a presentation. Miss Hayes, I want to be honest with you. When the reforms first came down, I thought they were bureaucratic nonsense, another layer of paperwork that would slow us down. Nora waited. But then one of our nurses flagged a potential medication error using the new reporting system. We investigated. Turned out she was right. If she hadn't spoken up, if we hadn't listened, a patient would have died. He extended his hand. So thank you for making us better. Nora shook it. Thank you for letting her speak. Moments like that made the exhaustion worth it. But not every interaction was positive. In Boston, a hospital administrator cornered her after a workshop. The man was red-faced, angry. You know what you've done? You've made it impossible to run a hospital. Every complaint gets investigated now. Every staff member thinks they can question every decision. It's chaos. Nora kept her voice level. Accountability isn't chaos. It's just uncomfortable for people who aren't used to it. You don't understand what it's like to manage a facility this size. The liability, the regulations, the pressure. You're right. I don't. Nora met his eyes. But I do understand what it's like to watch someone die because the people in charge were too proud to listen. The man walked away without another word. Nora stood there, heart pounding, hands shaking. Lieutenant Colonel Vance, who'd been observing from across the room, walked over. That was risky. He needed to hear it. Maybe. But you're making enemies. I've been making enemies since the beginning. Nora looked at her. What's a few more? Vance smiled. Fair point. 2 years into the job, Nora received a letter. Handwritten, postmarked from a small town in Iowa. She opened it in her office, not sure what to expect. Dear Miss Hayes, my name is Sarah Winters. I'm a nurse at a rural hospital in Iowa. 3 months ago, I noticed that one of our doctors was ordering unnecessary tests on elderly patients. I suspected billing fraud, but I was scared to say anything. I've worked here for 12 years. This is my community. I didn't want to be the person who caused trouble. Then I saw you speak at a conference in Des Moines. You talked about how staying silent doesn't protect anyone. It just protects the people doing harm. So I reported it. It was terrifying. I thought I'd lose my job, lose my friends, lose everything. But I didn't. The hospital investigated. The doctor was fired, and my colleagues thanked me. I'm writing because I want you to know that your story gave me the courage to do the right thing. And because of that, patients in my community are safer. Thank you. Sarah Winters. Nora read the letter twice. Then she put it in the folder with the others. That folder was overflowing now. She leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. This was why she kept going, not for the accolades or the headlines, for the Sarahs, the people who needed to know they weren't alone. That night she called General Hale. Hayes, to what do I owe the pleasure? I got another letter today, from a nurse in Iowa. Good letter or bad letter? Good, really good. She could hear him smile. Those never get old, do they? No, they don't. A pause. Then Hale spoke again. You know, I've been thinking. You've been doing this for 2 years now. When's the last time you took a break? I don't need a break. Everyone needs a break, even you. Nora looked out the window. I'll think about it. Don't think too long. Burnout's real, and we need you around for the long haul. After they hung up, Nora sat in silence. He was right. She was tired, bone-deep tired, the kind that didn't go away with a good night's sleep. But she wasn't ready to stop. Not yet. 3 years in, the reforms had become standard practice. Whistleblower protections were law in 43 states. Hospitals that didn't comply faced federal penalties, and retaliation cases had dropped by 60%. It wasn't perfect. There were still gaps, still hospitals that found ways to work around the rules, still people who got hurt. But it was better. Measurably, undeniably better. Nora stood in front of a Senate subcommittee, presenting the 3-year progress report. Senators asked questions. She answered them. Charts and data filled the screens behind her. When it was over, Senator Kellerman, the same man who'd led her first hearing, approached her in the hallway. Miss Hayes, I just want to say, what you've accomplished is remarkable. Thank you, Senator. I mean it. 3 years ago, this was a pipe dream. Now it's law. That's because of you. Nora shook her head. It's because of everyone who spoke up. I just gave them a platform. Kellerman smiled. You're more humble than you need to be. After he walked away, Nora stood in the marble hallway, looking up at the dome. She thought about the trainee nurse she'd been, invisible, silenced, scared. That person felt like a lifetime ago. But she remembered her, and she carried her forward. Because if she forgot where she came from, she'd forget why this mattered. That evening, Nora flew back to Washington. She took a cab to her apartment, dropped her bags, and collapsed on the couch. Her phone buzzed. A text from Jess. Saw you on C-SPAN. You're famous. Nora smiled and typed back. I'm tired. Come visit. You need a break. Maybe. Not maybe. Do it. This weekend. Nora stared at the message. Then she booked a flight. She spent the weekend in her old city, in her old apartment with her old roommate. They ate takeout, watched bad movies, talked about nothing important. It was exactly what she needed. On Sunday night, before her flight back, Jess walked her to the door. "You doing okay?" "Really?" Nora thought about it. "Yeah, I think I am." "Good, because you've done something incredible, and I need you to know that." Nora hugged her. "Thanks. Anytime." Back in Washington, Nora threw herself into the next phase: new legislation, expanded oversight, international collaboration with healthcare systems in Europe and Asia. The work never stopped, but neither did the impact. 4 years in, she received a call from Dr. Eric Callahan. She hadn't spoken to him in over a year. "Hayes." "Callahan, this is a surprise." "I know. I'm sorry to call out of the blue." He paused. "I wanted to tell you something. I'm teaching now at Johns Hopkins, medical ethics and crisis decision-making, and I use your case as the centerpiece of the course." Nora didn't know what to say. "I tell my students what happened," Callahan continued. "How we missed the airway. How you saw it. How I should have listened from the start. And I make them understand that the biggest threat in medicine isn't a lack of knowledge. It's arrogance." "That's good. I wanted you to know that. And I wanted to say again that I'm sorry. For everything." Nora took a breath. "I appreciate that. You changed my life, Hayes. I hope you know that." After he hung up, Nora sat in silence. Forgiveness was complicated. But maybe it didn't have to be all or nothing. Maybe it could be this: acknowledgement, growth, and the hope that people learned from their mistakes. 5 years after accepting the position, Nora stood in her office, packing up files. Her term was ending. The task force would continue, but under new leadership. She'd done what she came to do. Judge Grant walked in carrying a folder. "Leaving us?" Nora smiled. "Time to move on." "What's next?" "I don't know yet. Maybe go back to bedside nursing. Maybe something else." Grant set the folder on the desk. "Before you go, I want you to see this." Nora opened it. Inside was a summary report: 5 years of data, whistleblower cases, patient outcomes, lives saved. The numbers were staggering. "You did that," Grant said quietly. "All of it." Nora stared at the numbers. "We did that." "Take the win, Hayes. You've earned it." That night, Nora had dinner with General Hale one last time. They sat at their usual table, ordered their usual meals, and talked about everything and nothing. Finally, Hale leaned back and looked at her. "So what now?" "I'm thinking about teaching, maybe consulting, maybe just taking some time to figure out who I am when I'm not fighting." Hale smiled. "You'll always be fighting. It's who you are." "Maybe, but I'd like to try something quieter for a while." "Fair enough." He raised his glass. "To 5 years of hell, and to whatever comes next." They clinked glasses. Later, standing outside the restaurant, Hale extended his hand one last time. "You're one of the best people I've ever met, Hayes. Don't forget that." Nora shook his hand. "I'll try not to." She walked home slowly, savoring the cool night air. When she got to her apartment, she stood at the window and looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, a nurse was noticing something wrong. Somewhere, a patient's life was hanging in the balance. Somewhere, someone was deciding whether to speak up or stay silent. And because of the work she'd done, because of the fight she'd fought, that person had a better chance of being heard. That was enough. Nora turned away from the window and sat down at her desk. She opened her laptop and started typing. Not a report, not a policy brief, a book, her story. Start to finish. Everything she'd learned. Everything she wished someone had told her when she was a terrified trainee nurse standing in a trauma bay, watching a man die. She wrote until her fingers ached, until the words poured out faster than she could type, until the sun came up. And when she finally stopped, she leaned back and looked at what she'd created. A guide. A testament. A message to everyone who'd ever felt invisible. She titled it, "When the Smallest Voice Speaks." 6 months later, the book was published. It became a bestseller within weeks. Hospitals used it in training programs. Medical schools added it to their curricula. Nurses and doctors across the country read it and saw themselves in its pages. And Nora Hayes, once a trainee nurse who nobody listened to, became the voice that changed healthcare forever. She did speaking tours, wrote op-eds, consulted with governments, but she also went back to nursing, part-time, at a community clinic in Washington, working with patients who had nowhere else to go. Because at the end of the day, that's what it was always about. Not the headlines, not the reforms, not the recognition, the patients. One afternoon, a young nurse approached her in the clinic. She couldn't have been more than 23. Nervous, uncertain. "Miss Hayes?" Nora looked up. "Yes?" I wanted to say thank you. I read your book. It's the reason I became a nurse." Nora smiled. "What's your name?" "Emma? Emma Rodriguez." "Well, Emma, welcome to the hardest and most important job you'll ever have." Emma nodded, eyes bright. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you ever regret it, speaking up?" Nora thought about that, about everything she'd lost, everything she'd gained. "No," she said finally. "I don't." Emma smiled and walked away. Nora watched her go, and she thought about the trainee nurse she'd been, the one who'd stood in a trauma bay, terrified and alone, watching a general die. That nurse had made a choice, and that choice had saved a life, and that life had changed everything. She turned back to her work, hands steady, heart full, because the fight wasn't over. It never would be. But she'd proven something that mattered. That power didn't come from titles or degrees or years of experience. It came from seeing what others missed, from speaking when others stayed silent, from refusing to let fear win. And that power belonged to everyone, even the smallest voice in the room, especially the smallest voice in the room. Nora finished her shift, clocked out, and walked home through the streets of Washington. Somewhere above her, a plane flew overhead. Somewhere behind her, a hospital kept running. Somewhere ahead of her, another nurse was about to face an impossible choice. And because of what she'd done, that nurse would know they weren't alone, that they had a voice. And that voice mattered. Nora looked up at the sky and smiled. Then she kept walking.